Imagine being shoved off a helicopter by your sister and husband, leaving you in the woods with just shattered bones and betrayal. I struggled to stay alive for 6 days, creeping through the wilderness while pursuing my one goal, retribution. They took my life, said that I had died, and profited from my insurance, but they made one deadly error. I'm still alive. Additionally, the truth hit me hard when I attended my burial. This is the tale of how I unearthed a serial predator, exposed a killer, and brought justice to my near murder, a story they never anticipated. My name is Victoria Sterling, and I'm going to share with you the most bizarre tale of betrayal, survival, and retaliation you'll ever hear. 6 months ago, I was a prosperous tech entrepreneur with a devoted husband, a close bond with my sister, and what I believed to be the ideal life. Today, I'm ostensibly dead, at least based on my death certificate. I am still very much alive, though, and I have a story that will make your blood boil. It began on what should have been the most romantic day of my life, when my husband, Marcus, had leased a fancy house to throw us a lavish surprise on our 5th wedding anniversary. Our photographer for the day was my younger sister Emma, who had just started working as a professional photographer and had been pleading with me to let her practice on some actual assignments. There was a private helicopter for a picturesque tour over the Rocky Mountains, complete with champagne and a sunset dinner planned at a remote luxury lodge. Emma was incredibly tense, fumbling with her camera gear and avoiding eye contact, but I was so thrilled by the romantic gesture that I ignored her strange behavior. Marcus appeared to be a typical, charming, and attentive person, but I knew something was off from the first moment I saw her that morning. The helicopter ride began flawlessly, with Marcus holding my hand, pointing out landmarks, and Emma taking photos like crazy. The pilot, a man named Jake, who appeared to have been flying for decades, took us up over the most breathtaking landscape I'd ever seen, with the mountains stretching endlessly in every direction, painted in brilliant oranges and purples by the setting sun. Then Marcus recommended we take some pictures close to the open door for a more dramatic effect, and for about half an hour, it was pure enchantment. The helicopter had those big sliding doors that could open in midair, which Jake assured us was completely safe as long as we were strapped in. Emma was thrilled about the photo ops, and to be honest, so was I. I'd never been the adventurous type, and the prospect of having some amazing anniversary pictures appealed to me. Jake opened the door on my side of the helicopter, and the wind was amazing. I was strapped in with a full. Emma positioned herself to get the ideal picture of Marcus and me with the mountains and sunset in the background, and she kept telling us to get closer to the edge, to lean out a little further, to truly enjoy the moment. I recall wearing a body harness that was supposed to be flawless. Thinking about how professional she sounded and how confident she had become with her photography, I was proud of my little sister's development and how she had discovered her passion. Before that, she had been afraid of heights, but now she was leaning out of a helicopter to get the ideal shot. Suddenly, Emma took hold of my arm and said, "Tori, would you mind bending a bit more? Your eyes should mirror the mountains for me." With Marcus immediately behind me, his hands on my waist, ostensibly to keep me steady, I shifted my weight toward the aperture, stretching my body out as far as the harness would permit because I trusted her. Then I felt Emma's hands on my harness, and initially I thought she was adjusting something to assist me in getting into a better position, but then I heard my harness unclipping, and then I heard a clicking sound. "What are you, Emma?" Time paused in that terrible way that occurs during tragic moments, and I tried to say something, but before I could finish, she shoved me hard in the chest. When I looked at Emma's face, I saw something cold and calculated rather than the horror I expected to see. As I fell out of the helicopter, I saw Marcus's face, but she wasn't crying or terrified. She was watching me fall with the same detached focus she'd had snapping pictures. I was relieved that he was simply standing there observing with a look I had never seen before, not grabbing for me or calling my name. My mind was running through a million things in those few seconds of freefall, and the ground rushed up to meet me. The wind was so loud that I couldn't hear my cries, but I could feel them tearing out of my throat. How could Emma do this? Was this truly how I was going to die, and why wasn't Marcus trying to help me? I struck the forest canopy first, which likely saved my life, and the branches broke my fall just enough that when I eventually fell into the earth, I was unconscious but not dead. It was dark when I woke up. I was in pain. I didn't know how much time had gone by. Each part of my body ached, but I was alive somehow, and I had landed in a dense pine forest by a small creek. Despite my terrible concussion, multiple fractured ribs, scratches all over my body, and a broken arm, I was still breathing and tried to call for help first, but my phone was damaged, and I was miles away from civilization. Eventually, I dragged myself to the stream and drank some water. About 100 yards away, I crawled toward what appeared to be a small cave formation, probably saving my life because it was dry and shallow, and the cold mountain air was already making my wounds worse. I knew I had to find shelter, or I would die of exposure before anyone found me. Preventing the wind that was already bringing the temperature down to dangerous levels, I tried to stop the bleeding from the worst cuts with my jacket and waited for help to arrive. I assumed that someone would be searching for me and that Marcus and Emma would inform the authorities of my exact location. But when the hours stretched into a whole day, then 2 days, then 3, I came to the realization that nobody was approaching. No rescue crews were searching the forest, and no helicopters were flying search patterns. Marcus had watched me fall without trying to help, Emma had purposefully unclipped my harness, and I was weak from hunger and dehydration on the 4th day, but my head was finally clear enough to think about what had happened, as if I had just disappeared from the world and no one had the concern to search for me. They wanted me dead and hadn't told rescue crews where I was, but why? What could drive my sister and the man I loved to kill me? Marcus had recommended it as a prudent financial move to safeguard our future, and Emma was aware of it because the answer hit me like a kick to the gut: money. More specifically, the $5 million in life insurance I'd taken out 2 years prior. When my tech firm took off, Emma was the only beneficiary of my life insurance policy, and according to my will, Emma was to inherit half of my remaining assets, which would be significant given the circumstances. She had been my witness when I signed the documents. I needed 2 witnesses who weren't beneficiaries, and she had assisted me. They had planned this, and when all my assets were liquidated, they would be looking at around $8 million. I was so furious that I really found the strength to get up. I immediately determined that I wasn't going to die in that cave since the romantic helicopter flight, Emma's unexpected interest in photography, and the dramatic shots close to the open door, had all been set up. My husband and sister had planned to kill me for financial gain. Escaping from the wilderness was the most difficult thing I've ever done. I had to follow the stream for miles, eat berries and drink water when I could find it, and sleep in whatever shelter I could find. My broken arm hurt, but I made a crude shelter out of tree branches. I must have looked like I had been mauled by a bear when I staggered into the local cafe, and the waitress must have taken one look at me before calling for an ambulance. After 6 days of hiking over difficult terrain, I eventually discovered a logging road that went to a little town called Cedar Falls. When I was brought to a small regional hospital, the doctors confirmed what I already knew. I had a broken arm, broken ribs, severe bruising, malnourishment, and no permanent damage from my concussion, though I would likely have headaches for months. The doctors wanted to call my emergency contacts, but I refused. They agreed to let me stay registered under a false name, Victoria Stone, while I recovered, requiring some clever lying about misplaced identification and insurance cards. But small-town hospitals are surprisingly accommodating when you pay in cash. I explained that I had been in a hiking accident and needed time to get in touch with my family myself. As I recovered, I did some research on the hospital computer, and what I discovered made my blood boil again. Marcus had already reported me missing, saying I had gone on a solitary hike and never come back, telling the police that I had been acting strangely lately and that he was concerned I might have been suicidal. No helicopter flight or Emma being with us was mentioned. They'd made up a whole story about me just wandering off into the mountains and disappearing. Emma confirmed his story, stating I'd seemed depressed and had indicated wanting to go for a bit. Marcus had already begun the process of having me declared legally dead so he could claim the life insurance, and the police had searched a few well-known hiking trails, but they had given up after a few days because they had no specific area to focus on. I was officially listed as a missing person, presumed dead. Here's the point, though: Marcus and Emma had been having an affair in addition to plotting my assassination, which I learned about while investigating their falsehoods. Images of Emma and Marcus together in settings that were not family get-togethers, such as a romantic meal at a restaurant I had never been to or a weekend trip to a beach resort that Marcus had informed me was a business trip. Pictures of them appearing comfortable and personal in ways that made me feel horrible. My sister and husband had been cheating on me for months, if not longer, and they had been having sex the entire time before they decided to kill me. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks plotting my retaliation because I couldn't just go back to my old life and confront them, because they had already demonstrated that they were willing to kill me once, and they would probably try again if I came back. This time, they would ensure that the job was completed. I needed a better plan, so I decided to let them believe that they had succeeded. I would remain legally dead while I collected proof of their crimes, and when the time was appropriate, I would expose them in the most damaging way possible. First, I required a new identity. I was able to obtain fictitious documents and credentials under the name Victoria Stone through some contacts I had made in the tech industry, which cost me most of the money I had in my emergency fund, but it was worth it to be able to hide my activities. Then, using my new identity, I rented a modest apartment in Denver and began following Marcus and Emma, taking pictures of their meetings, recording their discussions when I could, and gradually assembling evidence against them. What I found was worse than I had anticipated. They weren't just having an affair, they had been stealing from my firm for more than a year. Marcus had been skimming client payments using my accounts, and Emma had been assisting him in laundering the money through her fictitious photographic business. Together, they had taken almost $200,000 from me before they decided it would be easier to just kill me and take everything, but what irritated me was hearing them talk about me. In recordings I made of their phone conversations, they addressed me as though I were a barrier they had removed, as if I were just a bothersome issue they had resolved. Marcus joked that he would never have to pretend to love me again, and they thought it would be easy to get rid of the dead weight. They planned to wait exactly a year before getting married, long enough to avoid suspicion but not long enough for people to forget about poor Victoria. For 3 months, I watched them live my life, spend my money, and plan their future together. Marcus was already openly dating other women, not Emma, for the money from my life insurance, and they were going to have a small, elegant ceremony before using it to launch a new business. The whole charade made me sick, but it also gave me the ideal opportunity for retaliation, so I decided that their plan had one major flaw. Emma was pretending to be Marcus's supportive sister-in-law, helping him deal with his loss while secretly planning their life together. Flaw: Marcus had planned a highly public funeral for me, complete with a memorial service where all of our friends and family would come to pay their respects. He said that this would give me enough time to come to terms with the fact that she was truly gone and that it would take place exactly 4 months after my departure. I spent weeks planning for the funeral, called a lawyer who specialized in insurance fraud, explained my predicament, and sought the assistance of a private investigator to help me obtain additional proof of their crimes. The day of my funeral was almost surreal, as I watched from across the street as friends I'd known for years filed into the church. I even contacted several journalists I knew from my IT work, individuals who would be highly interested in a story involving attempted murder and insurance fraud. Even some of my former boyfriends came to pay their respects, and my parents were there, shedding genuine tears for their daughter, whom they believed was gone forever, and my business partners were there, sincerely grieving for a friend and colleague they had respected. At the forefront were Marcus and Emma, dressed as a distraught sister and a sad widower, respectively. Marcus was dressed in the black suit I had purchased for our anniversary dinner the previous year, and Emma was sporting my grandmother's pearl necklace, which she had reportedly received upon my death. They were both performing Academy Award-worthy acts, sobbing, embracing, and taking condolences. The service was set to begin at 2 p.m. At 1:45, I walked. People began yelling, someone fainted, Marcus got so pale I thought he could have a heart attack, and Emma dropped the flowers she was holding and simply gazed at me with her mouth hanging open, and the reaction was immediate and magnificent as we entered the chapel. To let them know exactly who I was and what they had done, I wore a simple black dress, styled my hair the same way I had on the day they tried to kill me, and even bought the same shade of lipstick. "Hello, everyone," I said as I made my way slowly down the aisle toward the front of the church. I sincerely apologize for being late for my burial. People were crying, yelling questions, and attempting to understand what was going on in the ensuing turmoil. Marcus was avoiding me like I was a ghost. Emma looked like she was going to get sick, but I wasn't finished yet. I told the room, "I know this is confusing, but I have something truly important to tell you all." For months, my sister Emma and husband Marcus, who have been having an affair for more than a year and embezzling money from my business, attempted to kill me by shoving me out of a helicopter to obtain my life insurance money and take my assets. The ensuing stillness was deafening, and then everyone began speaking at once, demanding explanations, accusations flying, and several pulling out their phones to call the police. Marcus attempted to flee, but my private investigator blocked. Emma tried to say I was having some sort of mental breakdown, but I was prepared for that too. I held up a folder full of documents, saying, "I have evidence, including audio recordings of you planning my murder and making jokes about my death, photos of your affair, and records of the money you stole." Marcus finally said, "This is crazy. Victoria, you should be dead. Where have you been? We've been looking for you." The police had come by this time, and I had called them myself before going into the church, explaining the situation and asking them to be on the scene. "I've been recovering from the injuries I sustained when you and Emma threw me out of a helicopter," I said calmly, "and I've been building a case against you, and I've been waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth." Waiting. Marcus and Emma were caught immediately and charged with attempted murder, insurance fraud, and embezzlement. The story of the woman who broke into her funeral to reveal her husband's and sister's murderous scheme made national headlines. Even though I appeared on talk programs, conducted interviews with big networks, and even received offers for movie rights and book agreements, the best part was seeing their scheme come apart entirely, with the life insurance company not only refusing to pay out the policy but also filing fraud charges. Marcus was sentenced to 25 years for attempted murder, fraud, and embezzlement, and the company's board decided to press criminal charges for the embezzlement. As a result, the jury was able to hear the recordings I had made of their conversations, which included them laughing about my death and making plans for their future with my money. I sued them both for everything they owned, which wasn't much, since they'd already spent the majority of the money they'd stolen from me. As an accomplice, Emma received 15 years in prison, and neither of them will be eligible for release for at least 10 years. The civil suits were nearly as pleasant. What matters most, though, is that I got my life back, my actual life, not the false one they attempted to take away from me, as well as my grandmother's necklace and the satisfaction of seeing Emma have to sell her car and her camera gear to cover her legal bills. They were amazing, helped me rebuild my business, and helped me go through the legal process. My firm not only survived the scandal but grew stronger as people saw how resilient and determined I was. I also learned who my true friends were. Others stepped up in ways that amazed me, while others were unable to cope with the intensity of what had happened and gradually drifted away. My college roommate Lisa flew across the country to stay with me during the trial, and my business partner Sarah essentially ran the company alone while I was recovering. I'm in a better situation than I've ever been 6 months after selling my old house, because I couldn't bear to live there after everything that had happened, and several of my colleagues even planned fundraisers to help with my medical bills, not realizing that I was doing well financially. A stunning location in the mountains with a view that serves as a daily reminder that I survived. I've established a foundation to support other victims of financial abuse and domestic violence. I'm writing a book about my experience, with all proceeds going to organizations that support women in crisis, and I've learned some crucial lessons about trust, and in retrospect, I've seen indications that Marcus and Emma's actions were off, but I disregarded them because I wanted to think that the people I loved would never harm me. Today, I'm much more cautious about who I allow into my inner circle, and I trust my instincts more. The one question people ask me is whether. For a long time, I was outraged. The treachery was nearly as bad as the attempted murder. Am I still angry about what happened? Do I despise Marcus and Emma for their actions? They had been planning against me for months, stealing my money, destroying my sense of security, and attempting to kill me, all for financial benefit, and I had loved and trusted them fully, but I wasn't getting better by being angry. After a while, I concluded that the best form of retaliation was just to live a good life. Marcus and Emma are going to spend many years in prison, having lost everything they were attempting to take from me, along with their freedom and reputations. In contrast, I am free, prosperous, and surrounded by people who genuinely care about me. If they had been successful, I sometimes wonder what would have happened. Would they have been content to spend blood money? Would they have been able to live with themselves? Would their love have endured, given that it was based on murder and betrayal? I only know that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. They made their decisions and are now dealing with the fallout. I'll never know, and to be honest, I don't care. What you take away from my story should be this: I survived a murder attempt, lived alone in the wilderness for 6 days, created a new identity from scratch, and planned one of the most spectacular revelations in recent memory. I transformed what should have been the worst day of my life into the moment I took charge of my fate. It's common for those who are meant to love you to betray you in the most terrible ways, but that's okay. Trust your gut, value yourself enough to expect better. It doesn't mean you're helpless. You always have the option to defend yourself, to live, and to build a better life for yourself. If someone tries to kill you to get the money from your life insurance, crashing your funeral is a pretty good way to make sure they don't get away with it. Marcus and Emma, that's the thing about attempted murder, they tried to write my conclusion. But I wrote my own comeback story instead. They believed they could wipe me out of the world and make money off my death, but instead, they made me stronger, more successful, and more famous than I'd ever been. My tale doesn't finish there, but if you make it through it, you get the final word. My last word is that I'm still here, still fighting, and living my best life while they languish in prison. Officially, the funeral crashed, justice was served, and life was recovered. My case's lead investigator, Detective Rodriguez, called me 3 weeks after Marcus and Emma were sentenced with news that would upend everything I believed to be true about my attempted murder. The months after the trial brought revelations that, in contrast, made the initial betrayal seem almost simple. With an unusually tense voice, she added, "Victoria, we need to talk. We've been looking more closely at your sisters and husbands, finances, and we've discovered something troubling. Come to the station, please." Numerous documents had been distributed by Detective Rodriguez when I got there. Bank bills, phone logs, travel receipts, and images I had never seen before were spread out on a conference table. "We found that Marcus and Emma's plan was much more complex than we first thought," she started. "They didn't kill you only to get insurance money. You weren't their first target, and they've been planning this for more than 2 years, she said, displaying a picture of a blonde lady who looked to be in her 30s, and she smiled warmly. "She's Rebecca Chen. Marcus's first wife was her. Before you met with him." 5 years ago, she was killed in a vehicle accident. The blood in my veins went cold. According to him, he had never been married. He made many false statements. The beneficiary of Rebecca's $1 million life insurance policy was Marcus. Although the accident was first deemed suspicious, charges could not be brought because of insufficient evidence. Detective Rodriguez took out additional pictures. Rebecca's wrecked vehicle. The scene of the accident. Findings from a medical examiner. Several discrepancies were observed by the investigating police. Although Rebecca was a flawless driver, with no prior collisions, she reportedly lost control while driving. Every day, she drove. Although Marcus had an alibi, her brakes had been tampered with. When the accident occurred, he was at his job. Emma, I said in a whisper, instantly understanding. We believe so. Telephone logs reveal that Emma, despite telling investigators she was in Denver the entire time, was in Rebecca's city on the day of the accident. We've learned more about Rebecca's partnership, so we're reopening her case. I was presented with additional information by the detective, which revealed a long-standing pattern of financial manipulation. Marcus has a past that included specifically pursuing prosperous women, wooing them into marriage, then methodically robbing them before planning their demise. In at least 3 other incidents they were currently looking at, Emma had been his accomplice. Detective Rodriguez stated, bringing out a big folder, there's something else. There was a thorough plot for your assassination on Marcus's laptop, which we located. Victoria, it wasn't just about the insurance money. When you passed away, he had a whole plan for taking over your company. I was sickened by the documents she showed me. Marcus discovered important workers he could influence, studied corporate succession regulations, and even wrote fictitious letters to give the impression that I had been preparing to sell the business before I passed away. As a bereaved widower, he had planned to take over my shares and persuade my business partners to allow him to do so. The value of your business is far greater than the insurance policy, she said. If everything went according to plan, we think he would have made about $15 million. But there was still more to discover. We discovered evidence, Victoria, indicating Marcus was preparing to murder Emma after a proper amount of time. She knew too much and was getting too demanding. Untraceable research was discovered. Killed people and poisoned them in his browsing history. As I sat in startled silence, I tried to take in what I was hearing. Marcus wasn't only a liar. Emma had been an accomplice of his, a serial killer who intended to kill her as well. His manipulation also affected Emma, whom I had detested for months, even though she had taken part in horrible atrocities. You will have to testify in the other cases. Detective Rodriguez stated, we may be able to bring Rebecca and the other victims justice with the evidence you collected and your survival. I was at the center of a much wider investigation over the following few months. The investigation that began with my attempted murder had revealed a pattern of crimes that had occurred over almost 10 years. Before meeting me, Marcus had succeeded in killing 3 of the 5 women he had targeted. The level of media interest increased significantly. What started as a dramatic tale of a woman attending her funeral turned into a national investigation into a serial killer who perpetrated insurance and marriage fraud. Members of the victims' relatives, law enforcement from several states, and authors of publications concerning the case. At this time, I also became more aware of Emma's significance in all of this. She consented to collaborate with investigators through her attorney in exchange for a lighter sentence. What surfaced was a photograph of a young lady who had been progressively coerced and tainted by Marcus over several years. Emma was financially distressed when Marcus initially came up to her. He had offered her money to assist with menial chores like following people, taking pictures, and fabricating documents. She believed that she was assisting with insurance claims or cases involving cheating spouses. She did not discover the full nature of their activities until she became firmly involved. Emma wrote in a letter to me via her attorney, I know this doesn't excuse what I did to you. I want you to know, though, that you are still my sister, and I love you. Marcus persuaded me that you had grown aloof and self-centered as a result of your success and that you were going to stop wanting me. He led me to assume that you had lost interest in our family, the letter went on. He showed me fictitious emails he said were from you, describing how you considered me a failure and a burden and that you were going to ban me from any future family gatherings. He also said that you had given your lawyer instructions to take me out of your will. Emma had been too proud to ask me for help, and Marcus had said, I wanted the money to help pay for Mom's medical bills. I was afraid and desperate, and I believed him because I didn't realize her mother was having financial difficulties with her healthcare. I know how horrible that sounds now, but I used that pride to turn her against me. I told myself that if you were gone, I could use the inheritance money to take care of Mom and build a better life. Emma's letter ended. Although I am aware that there is no excuse for what we did, I want you to know that pushing you out of that helicopter was the worst thing I have ever done, and I have been having nightmares about it every night since. One of the most emotionally Complex parts of my entire ordeal was reading Emma's letter. I was still upset with her for attempting to kill me, but I also felt a strange kind of sympathy. A master manipulator who had spent years honing his craft of turning people against one another had influenced her. The extra trials took more than a year to finish, and Marcus was ultimately found guilty of 3 charges of first-degree murder and 2 more counts of attempted murder. Since Emma cooperated with investigators, her sentence was lowered to 8 years with the potential of release in 5 years, but Marcus received numerous life sentences without the option of parole. It was at this time that I learned more about Marcus's background and how he had grown to be the person he was. Investigators discovered that his true name was Marcus Thompson, who had changed his identity several times over the years, and that he had been raised in foster care after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12, moving from home to home and experiencing abuse and neglect. None of this absolved him of his crimes, but it did help me understand how someone could become so cunning and vicious. Marcus had learned early on that he couldn't rely on anyone to look after him, so he learned how to take care of himself by whatever means necessary. Marcus was a textbook psychopath, charming and manipulative on the outside but devoid of empathy or true emotion, according to the psychological evaluation done for his sentencing. Sadly, those means included murder. The psychiatrist testified that Marcus saw other people as tools to be used for his gain rather than as human beings, creatures worthy of affection or respect. As the court case came to an end, I was in an odd situation. I had gained some notoriety as the woman who had escaped a serial killer and revealed his crimes, and I was receiving requests to speak at law enforcement conferences, victim advocacy organizations, and true crime conventions. While production companies wanted to option my tale for films and documentaries, and publishers were offering me large advances for book deals, I wanted to rebuild my life and find a way to pay tribute to the women who had not been as fortunate as I had been, not to gain fame. In honor of Marcus's first victim, I founded the Rebecca Chin Foundation, which offers financial support to women attempting to flee abusive relationships, investments in psychological manipulation and coercive control research, support services for families of murder victims, and training for law enforcement agencies to identify patterns of financial abuse and murder-for-profit schemes. They helped me process my trauma and find meaning in what had happened to me. Through the foundation, I met other survivors of similar crimes, including investigators who specialized in these kinds of cases, families who had lost loved ones to charming sociopaths, and women who had fled abusive partners who had attempted to kill them for insurance money. For example, the foundation has advocated for legislation requiring more extensive background checks before issuing large life insurance policies, improved training for insurance investigators who handle suspicious death claims, and changed laws about insurance fraud and spousal murder, among other rewarding aspects of our work. My testimony helped pass legislation that established a national database for tracking unusual patterns in insurance claims, and 2 years after my helicopter falling, I testified before a congressional committee regarding the need for improved coordination between law enforcement agencies when investigating suspicious deaths involving life insurance. I also collaborated with worked with tech companies to create software that can detect red flags in insurance applications and claims, and I have used my technical expertise to help create algorithms that can detect suspicious patterns that human investigators might overlook. However, perhaps the most significant work I have done is to speak directly to women about how to spot the warning signs of financial abuse and manipulation. How did you not see the signs, is the most common question I receive when I share my story and teach people how to defend themselves against predators like Marcus at college campuses, women's shelters, and corporate gatherings. What should women be aware of, in your opinion? The first question has a convoluted answer. Marcus was a master manipulator who had spent years honing his craft and had figured out how to sell himself as the ideal companion. He was successful without being needy, attentive without being needy, and the warning signs that I missed were subtle, but he was always eager to know about my financial situation, framing it as wanting to plan our future together. He seemed to genuinely care about my dreams and goals, being supportive without being controlling and encouraging my success rather than feeling threatened by it. He recommended the life insurance policy but framed it as prudent money management. He withdrew me from some of my friends over time, but he did it so deftly that I believed I was making those decisions myself. He also had a remarkable talent for spotting and taking advantage of vulnerability. I was afraid that my success would make me unlovable, and Marcus understood that many men had been put off by my professional accomplishments. Marcus made me feel different with Emma, abused her financial instability and her fear that I didn't think highly of her because she wasn't as successful as I was. I always give women a list of warning signs that I wish I had noticed, such as partners who insist on getting large life insurance policies early on in the relationship, particularly if they propose themselves as the primary beneficiary. Financial secrecy or pressure to consolidate finances quickly. Intrusive, even subtle, attempts to distance you from friends and family, overzealous interest in your business or career, especially if they begin to suggest changes to your will or business structure, and, perhaps most importantly, follow your gut. If something feels off, look into it instead of brushing it off. Dear Victoria, wrote Linda, Rebecca Chen's sister, who had been at Marcus's trial for her sister's murder, I wanted to thank you for giving my family the closure we never thought we'd have. I got an unexpected letter 3 years after the helicopter incident. In light of despite our inability to prove it, we had known for 5 years that Rebecca's death was not an accident. Our long-sought justice was ultimately granted by your bravery in exposing Marcus and your readiness to testify in Rebecca's case. Linda continued by telling me about Rebecca, how she had been a bright engineer who had founded her own consulting business, how she had been looking forward to her future with Marcus, and how her death had devastated the family. Marcus' misdeeds seemed all the more painful and real after reading about Rebecca's thoughts and existence. Your foundation is something Rebecca would have loved, Linda said. In life and business, she had always aspired to support other women. It brings comfort to our family to know that your efforts to support other women are honoring her memory. My emotional journey took a significant turn when I received that letter. It made me realize that my survival had involved more than just getting another opportunity at life. Obtaining justice for the women who had perished and shielding other women from harm had also been important. I've been out of that chopper for 5 years since Marcus shoved me out. He has been sentenced to several life terms and will stay in a maximum security jail for the rest of his life. Emma has been working with the organization as part of her community service since being released on parole following years of service. It's a complex relationship. We've managed to collaborate despite not being as close as sisters should be, toward a constructive objective. Compared to 5 years ago, my life is very different now, although in many respects it's preferable. I value sincere connections more, but I'm also more cautious about trust. I'm cognizant of my fortitude and tenacity. And I discovered a feeling of direction that I had never experienced when my main worries were quarterly market share and earnings. It has aided more than 2,000 women in escaping harmful situations, and we have helped change laws that have made it more difficult for predators to access and engage in such offenses. Research that has improved the psychological characteristics of financial predators, and hundreds of law enforcement personnel have received training from us on how to identify and look into these cases. I still get nightmares occasionally. The sound still makes me cringe. Helicopters in the sky. Furthermore, I still have trouble fully trusting individuals. However, I have discovered that living past the first shock is not the only aspect of survival. Building a life that respects both your fortitude as well as the remembrance of others who were less fortunate. Marcus believed he could cut me out of the world for financial gain. Instead, his attempt on my life resulted in other killings being made public. Future crime prevention and the establishment of a network of assistance that will shield women for decades to come will arrive. The best retaliation is sometimes to live a good life and use your survival skills to make the rest of the world a little bit safer.